Some weapons should just be called checkmate devices. What's up, MetaNerds? This video is all about the E-Web heavy repeating blaster cannon. We'll start with when we see it first, during the Battle of Hoth. We'll get into how it works and all the different variants. But do be warned, we will get into some major spoilers for the Mandalorian Season 1 finale. But let's start by looking at how the Stormtroopers use this thing, because of course they were well trained with it, and use it as the manufacturer intended, which is not true for the Rebels and Mando that we'll look at in a bit. On this icy world, we see the invading Imperial forces lugging an E-Web, just in case they come upon any entrenched fighters or ships and vehicles. This also would have been valuable in overpowering any personal shield generators. Here we see that the two-man crew was able to assemble the weapon in just a few seconds, but they are cut down by the Millennium Falcon. This first debut really doesn't show off its incredible power, but it does start to show us how this thing works. This box was an Exxon Class 4TS power generator, which also contained a state-of-the-art GK3 cryocooler unit. Inserting the gun into the tripod base was simple enough, but it was this powerful bolt-generating and system-cooling combo that required the two-man crew. That and of course the fact that you just needed two people to carry the thing around. The cannon itself weighed 38 kilograms or 84 pounds. But once you wanted to fire, you really needed this technician. An Imperial gunner known by the name Radon says, "Without a second man, it's very hard to shoot an E-Web. There's no fire control, you can't nurse your power supply or watch the cooler." What he means is that the technician is actively adjusting the amount of power and Tabana gas supplied to the cannon, and the amount of coolant used in direct reaction to the gunner's rate of fire. Some other quirks are that the power generator would take 15 minutes to be able to operate if it was cold. To get around this, the technicians would often keep theirs pre-charged, though this was known to make their job even harder, and deadly overcharge malfunctions more likely. This may seem like a lot of work, but it was only 8,000 credits. It's only about 10 times a DL-44 blaster pistol, and just 4 times the cheap B-1 battle droid. And that even came with an encrypted, built-in comlink system that worked like a local network between each of the cannons. This helped the Imperials to carry out some stealthy raids, but that does work both ways, as many rebels and criminal organizations were also drawn to this weapon's low cost, and this uncrackable comm system. The E-Web's range was also impressive, 200 meters optimum with 750 meters max range, which was 4x and 10x the range of the DL-44 respectively. Years before the Battle of Hoth, we saw them used by the Mining Guild to keep Purgle away from their gas refinery. And we also see that despite being incredibly powerful, these bolts can be deflected by a lightsaber, like what we see with Kanan. It should also be noted that these Mining Guild ones fire yellow-colored bolts, something we usually only see with the Mandalorian blasters. And if you were wondering, it has never been fully explained why it has this color. Another thing that made it appealing to rebel groups is that it could be operated easily by a novice. Just point and shoot with almost no recoil. And even for targets at a distance, there was this easy-to-use scope. But of course, this thing was a primary target of incoming enemy fire, and thus you could have inexperienced fighters losing their nerve in the middle of battle.
Get the fight! Man those cannons!
But when correctly laying shots downrange, it could easily blast holes in enemy vehicles. And in this case, on Lothal, it actually forced Imperial dropships to quickly turn tail. Now what's funny is that the manufacturer claims that this weapon is simply too large to be carried by a single person. You just can't do it. Which is why both Zeb and the Mandalorian prove that sometimes it's better to just try it out. Stronger than your average stormtrooper this guide was written for, the Lasat can easily wield this powerful blaster. And we see that when these bolts hit their target, it can easily blow apart a dropship with just a few shots. But we do see that once it's disconnected from its power source and Tabana gas, the blaster burns through the little bit that was still charged in the weapon in just a few seconds. But of course, it can always work as a melee weapon at that point. Jumping forward to the year 9 ABY, we are in the era of the Imperial Remnant, and on the planet Navarro, Moff Gideon gives a whole monologue praising some of the moments that made this weapon infamous throughout the galaxy. He starts with how it was used with ruthless effectiveness against the Republic shock troopers.
She has witnessed many of her ranks vaporized mid-descent, facing the predecessor of this particular model.
Dune actually hinted at this in a previous episode, and though her tattoos seem symbolic of the Republic shock troopers and their iconic red color scheme, Cara was with Special Forces in the Rebellion. But once the Alliance transitioned into the New Republic, these shock troopers did take on a similar role to the old Coruscant Guard, defending dignitaries and acting as riot police.
Then when the imps were gone, the politics started. We were peacekeepers, protecting delegates, suppressing riots, not what I signed up for.
But we also learn how this weapon was key to conquering the homeworld of one of the toughest people in the galaxy, how the Empire used it to take control of Mandalore, an event that has been built up a lot in the Rebel series.
Has heard the songs of the siege of Mandalore, when gunships outfitted with similar ordnance laid waste to fields of Mandalorian recruits in the night of 1,000 tears.
This is how they got all that Beskar in Imperial hands, and what forced this once proud people to go into hiding. Unlike Zeb, the Mandalorian knew enough about this weapon to not disconnect it from its hose, so he would retain that full firepower, just of course that added difficulty since he's carrying it all himself. This is able to rip through ranks of stormtroopers, but what's interesting is just how deadly the explosion was when Moff Gideon fired at the generator. The blast isn't even directly on the Mandalorian, yet it sent him flying through the air and would have killed him if he did not receive medical attention. There was so much power in this generator that it was that deadly even through his incredible Beskar armor and undersuit. So that's it for its history and breakdown, and as for the cool facts and behind the scenes stuff, there are actually several different versions of this weapon. Moff Gideon even mentions that the one that he's using is a successor to the more infamous versions, and the gunship mounted cousin of the E-Web. The F-Web had this triple blaster system, and even a shield generator, though this system was even more complicated and needed a third crew member. The E-Web 15 was able to cut down the startup time to just 5 minutes, ironically down from 15, and some of these would work in a deflector shield generator as well. During the Clone Wars era, the go-to was the EWHB-12 heavy repeating blaster, and many see that the Imperial E-Web was actually a step backwards, because this Republic era one could target enemy clankers and fire automatically, without the need of anyone manning it. Then there was this E-Web rifle, which is made from the same manufacturer and used a lot of the same design features, really noticeable in the barrel, but of course functioned more like a standard heavy blaster rifle, and this was also used during the Battle of Hoth. The E-Web has also appeared in the LEGO Star Wars game, and a lot of this information comes from the Star Wars role-playing core book, the new Essential Guide to Weapons Technology, and the Essential Guide to Warfare in the Imperial Sourcebook. So that's it for the E-Web. If you want to connect with us on social media, find ways that you can help support this channel without it costing you a thing, or check out our Patreon, be sure to check out the links in the description. Special shout out to our supporters over on Patreon, and most important of all, remember, hit the gym hard, so that you too can defy the owner's manual, just don't unplug it like a Lasat, and the Force will be with you, always.